I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Bruce Shelton, who to many of you does not need an introduction. But it is my great pleasure and admiration. Bruce is one of the senior pastors here with the fellowship and has been with us for such a very long time, has supported the fellowship of the inner light in a profound way, and cared for and supported many people in it, and also in his other walk in life. Bruce Shelton has led a life of service in a very beautiful, calm, and open way. Come on, Bruce. Let's give him a warm family welcome.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's indeed my pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you this morning. We're going to talk about Taoism. And before we get into our talk, the way I always like to start my talks is I'd like to ask us all just to be silent for a few moments as we ask God just to use me as a teacher this morning. So it won't come from my ego, but come from within me, that you'll hear what you need to hear, so rather than what I would like to tell you. So let's all just be silent just for a moment. Make ourselves aware of the presence of God in this room. Thank you, Father. Okay. I don't know where everybody came from. Seemed like there was nobody here when we started. I thought, well, July 4th, but everybody's here. All right. Well, today's talk is going to be on Taoism. And as a preface to my talk, I'd like to just comment that we are, as we state in our statement of purpose, we are an interfaith spiritual community that honors each individual's path, extremely important point, each individual's path, and seeks to understand the core teachings of all world religions and spiritual masters that hold love, light, and joy to be the nature, character, and manifestation of God. So if we say that we are an interfaith church, we really want to know about other religions, other spiritual traditions. You'll note that in our altar we honor Christianity with a cross. We have Judaism, Star of David up here in our symbol. Over here we have six other altars that we offer. We call this our interfaith altar. And the other religions that we honor in this church are Islam, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and the primal religions. Now, the primal means first. People say, what are the primal religions? Well, primal means first. So this has to do with the first religions. When early human beings looked at the world, at some point, they got beyond just survival mode and they started asking themselves, why am I here? What's it all about? Who created all this? That was the beginning of spirituality and consciousness. It was more than just survival, getting food and so forth. And so they looked at nature and they said, whatever it was that created the stars, the trees, the forests, the oceans, there was some being that did this. And these religions today are now still practiced by the Native Americans, Aborigines, native tribal religions in Africa and Central and South America. these primal religions are still practiced. They're very Celtic in nature, very earth-oriented. But we have these 8 religions that we honor in this church. There are more. We could add more. But there's 8 that we honor in this church. And today we're going to take a look at Taoism. Taoism to me, is one of my favorite religions. It has a wonderful philosophy of life that's very, very applicable to you and I today in terms of how to live, how to deal with the stresses, the challenges that we face every day in our lives. Taoism is said to have been created by a man named Lao Tzu, who was born, we're told, in 604 BC. This is about 2,600 years ago, a long time ago. He is said to have been an archivist in a kingdom in China. And archivist in those days meant that he was a scholar. He was a keeper of the records, but he was not just any normal scholar and keeper of the records. This man was an enlightened being. He looked at the world. He saw all the suffering, much like the Buddha did. Saw all the suffering in the world. And he said, life shouldn't be like this, you know? And he had insights in terms of how we could live our lives so that suffering could end and we could begin enjoying life as we were meant to be. And we're told that he spent his life teaching others. He had many followers, but near the end of his life, he became frustrated. He became tired because in spite of all his work, he still saw suffering in the world. So he decided to leave his home, spend his elder years in Tibet. He lived in China. He decided to go to Tibet, and the legend tells us he got on his water buffalo and was heading towards Tibet in his later years. And as he was passing the Hanko Pass, the gatekeeper there noticed him and recognized who he was. And he says, "Master, you can't leave us. You know, we need you. We'd be lost without you." But shortly he could tell that Lao Tzu had made his mind up. He was going. And so the gatekeeper stepped back. He says, "Okay, I respect your need to leave. What I would ask you to do before you leave, though, however, is just to write out your teaching so that we have something to go back to once you're gone." And this is what he decided to do. Lao Tzu, we're told, spent 3 days in a shelter writing out his teachings. And he came up with a set of writings that consisted of no more than 5,000 Chinese characters. And Euston Smith, who's one of the great scholars that I have so much respect for, Euston Smith says that the Tao Te Ching was the name of the book, can be read in 45 minutes or in a lifetime, depending on how deep you want to go with the book. It's a short book, but it contains a wealth, just a goldmine of spiritual gems and wisdom. And from this book, an entire religious philosophy was developed over the next 2,600 years that now has influenced the lives of hundreds of millions of souls over all this period of time in a very, very positive way. Interestingly, to me, Lao Tzu was a contemporary of the Buddha and Confucius. Confucius all 3 of these great souls lived the same time period. Amazingly, isn't it? These three of the 8 religions we honor in this church, these 3 guys all came in the same time. Confucius lived in China. The Buddha, of course, lived in India. But Confucius is said to have heard about this great teacher named Lao Tzu, and he left a written statement. He described Lao Tzu as, he likened him to a dragon, enigmatic, larger than life, and mysterious, quote unquote. Isn't that interesting? So, Lao Tzu taught us about the Tao. What is the Tao? Well, to me, the clearest description of what the Tao is given in chapter 25 of the Tao Te Ching. And it reads like this: "There is a being, wonderful, perfect. It existed before heaven and earth. How quiet it is, how spiritual it is. It stands alone and does not change. It moves around and around but remains undisturbed. All life springs forth from it. It wraps all things with its love, as in a garment. And yet it claims no honor, for it does not demand to be called Lord. I do not know its name, and so I call it Tao, the way, and I rejoice in its power. Isn't that a beautiful description? And so the Tao can be translated, that word can be translated as the way. To me, it's a fascinating play on words. What Lao Tzu is telling us is that he's talking about a being, a force that is beyond words. So I'm going to call it the Tao, which means listen to my teachings, listen to what I have to teach you, follow this path, and this is the way to enlightenment. This is the way to everything your heart's desire. This is the way to your true self. So the Tao can be translated as the way. It can also be translated simply as being, B-E-I-N, capital B. The very first statement I just read to you, there is a being, wonderful and perfect. So it can be translated as being. Comparing this with Judeo-Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, it's really talking about the same being as God. And we use the word God. Talking about just another word for God. But I just like the word Tao. It's kind of a neat word to use. But we're really, all these great spiritual teachers, my point is, are talking about the same thing. You know, we're talking about enlightenment, talking about knowing ourselves, talking about waking up to who we really are. Whether it's Buddha, Jesus, or Lao Tzu, Krishna. All right, well now the Tao can be known on 3 different levels. There's 3 different ways in which we can know God, okay? First level is in the way of what Houston Smith calls ultimate reality. That's a good way to describe the source of all life, the ultimate reality. This is the mind of God. This is beyond form and human understanding. This is the level of the Tao that, as it says in the Tao Te Ching, quote, above all, behind all, beneath all is the womb from which all life springs and to which it returns, end quote. So this is what Jesus would refer to as the Father. This is the kingdom of heaven. This is the causal force that's behind it all. So we can know the Tao on that level, as with the Hindus in the Bhagavad Gita will use the word the unmanifest or the unnameable. This is the causal force that's behind it all, the source of all life, the creator, sustainer, recreator of all that is. The second level at which we can know the Tao is on the level of the way of the universe. Okay, in other words, we can know the Tao through the creation of the Tao. The universe is the creation of the Tao. So we can know the Tao through nature, through every blade of grass. The Tao is expressing itself. You see through everything that lives and everything, all inanimate objects as well. We know the Tao through that. The Tao is, quote, the essence, the rhythm, and the driving power in all nature. Giving life to all things, quote, it's referred to in the Tao Te Ching as the mother of the universe. Now, one of the interesting things that I love about Taoism is because of its understanding that everything is an expression, you see, of the Tao. It has a reverence for nature. There's a great reverence for treating the earth as a sacred being that we need to love and respect. There's a statement in a teaching in the Tao Te Ching that says, those who would take over the earth and shape it to their will never, I notice, succeed. The earth is like a vessel so sacred that at the mere approach of the profane, it is marred. They reach out their fingers and it is gone, quote unquote. Now, in different periods of Chinese history, Taoist art would sometimes become very predominant. Taoist art is very fascinating, and I brought a picture that I got off the internet of Taoist art. I'm going to actually pass this around so you can look at it in detail, but for one thing, I never could find any that have any colors. They're all like this type of, they weren't real big on colors, but they would love these landscape paintings, right, in which they honored the earth. One of the fascinating things about it was they would show human creation, such as a house or a temple, as being very small. You see, putting us in our proper perspective, We think we're we're over nature. No, the Taoists say we're humans in nature, not over nature. So you'll see in this picture, when it gets passed around, there's a little house here, and over here is a little small figure of a human being with a cane walking. So they'll show pictures and see how small the human being is compared to the vastness of the whole. So this is Taoist art. This is all comes from the basic Taoist teachings of putting us in perspective and honoring the world for what it is. So I'll just pass this. You can pass this around and look at it as I'm talking. Now, of all the elements in the world that the Taoists were most fascinated with, the element that most intrigued them was the element of water. They would look at water and they'd say, this water is just like the Tao. Look how pliable it is. Look how supple it is. Look how it's totally non-resistant. You can have some water, you slam your hand into it, your hand goes right through it. It's totally pliable and supple. Yet, at the same time, water is so powerful that you take a stream going across a granite mountain, and over a period of time, you create the water creates this great canyon. And of course, the one that comes to mind to all of us is the Grand Canyon. All created by the power of water. So it's very supple, very pliable, but infinitely powerful and infinitely strong. That's the Tao. And in water, we're told, there's a great lesson there for how we can live our lives. The more we can be like water, you see. In other words, the more we can get materiality out of our minds, the more, and the best words is the more we can remove our ego, get the ego out of the way, so that there's only the Tao within us. You see, any type of stressor can hit us, and there's no fear. There's nothing there to be reactive to it. You see, we get to that state of consciousness. We're totally non-resistant. We're totally non-reactive. That's an awakened state. That's what so that they see all this in water, which I think is cool. Now, the third, I said there's three levels at which we can know the Tao. The first is the way of ultimate reality. The second is in the terms of seeing the Tao in the universe at large. The third is knowing the Tao in our own lives. The way of human life. How does the Tao affect you and me? So over time, a philosophy developed. They call it philosophical Taoism. An entire philosophy developed teaching us how to basically get our thoughts right so that we can live in harmony with the Tao, so that we can bring down our stress levels. 2,600 years ago, they had just as much stress then as we do today, just different ways, So this is all about basically learning how to deal with the stresses of life. So philosophical Taoism is a philosophy of life designed to enable us to conserve life's vitality by not expending it in useless, draining ways, the chief of which are friction and conflict. Think about relationships you have with people, the conflicts we have, and how draining it is. Taoism is all about living in harmony with others, living in peace with others. If we do that, for me personally, the most stressful experiences I've had in life have been in relationships. Because I like people to like me, and I just don't like it when people are mad at me, So it causes, when I have people that are upset, or maybe they're not mad at me personally, but just people upset about something, it's really, I'm very sensitive. I'm very disturbed by it. So this is, philosophical Taoism is all about, Bruce, what have you got to do to get yourself together so that you stop being so disturbed? And you're contributing to some of the conflict. What can you do to deal with this? And so the Taoists introduced this term called Wu Wei. That's spelled W-U, the second word is W-E-I. Wu Wei. Just out of curiosity, how many people in this room have ever heard of this concept, Wu Wei? You may not, okay, that's cool. And that's just what I expected. Now all of you will know about it. Wu Wei is a state of consciousness that enables us to have dominion, basically has dominion over our lives. Wu Wei is translated creative quietness. Okay? Creative quietness. Wu Wei, in accordance with Taoist teachings, is all about the importance, the supreme importance of quietening our minds, keeping our mental state quiet so that we can focus and connect with our center. Okay? All the religions teach this, don't they? We've got to quieten our ego, just quieten everything down so that until we do that, get our thoughts, our feelings calmed down. Until we do that, we can't really connect with our center. So Wu Wei is all about maintaining a state of consciousness so that we can stay connected with who we really are. It has to do with quieting the ego so that the Tao is free. It's an attitude of total non-resistance, acceptance, and non-judgment. Now, the way this can be explained by way of example, because all these words kind of go over your head after a while, you know, what's he really talking about? So the best way to ever teach anything is by way of example. And there's a great example. It's the example of Prince Wen Wu's cook and the cleaver. Okay? Now, I apologize to the vegetarians in here before I give this example, because this is not a vegetarian type story. But it says, when the cook cut up an ox, out went a hand, down went a shoulder. He planted a foot, he pressed with a knee, and the ox fell apart with a whisper. When the cook was asked, "How do you do this? How do you do it this well?" He replied, "Well, you see, there are spaces in the joints. When my thin blade finds these spaces, it has all the room it needs, and therefore it remains sharp. I never have to sharpen it." You see, so the idea here is that an enlightened master his mind is so quiet that he can actually tune in to the spaces and the joints of the ox that he's cutting up, and go exactly right through those spaces, so he never has to sharpen his knife, his cleaver. So, isn't that interesting? I saw everybody woke up when I started talking about the axe flying, you know. Now, another great teaching in Taoism is a great tenet, a very important part of the whole teaching has to do with the importance of humility. Taoists say, I love these statements from the Tao Te Ching. It says, "He who stands on tiptoe does not stand firm." Okay, talking about humility now. "The axe falls first on the tallest tree. He who feels punctured must first have been a bubble." Okay? So if ever you feel deflated because somebody just punched deflated you, it means you must have just been inflated. Don't be inflated. You see, it's the teaching. So what is humility? Humility goes all back to the ego. It's simply taking our egos and putting it aside. Once the ego's aside, that's everything. Then we can connect with our center. Then then our thoughts and our feelings become our servant rather than our master. When the ego's driving the bus, we have all sorts of problems in our lives. So humility is a key teaching. And it's just like Jesus taught the same thing. Jesus was a great teacher of humility. He would wash the feet of his disciples. He said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." What is meekness? That's another word for humility. Inherit the earth. That means having dominion over the world. I can have dominion over my world instead of being the slave to this going wrong. Financial problems, health problems, job problems. Instead of all these problems, I can actually be the master of my world if I have this state of meekness, this state of humility that Jesus talked about. All right, so over time, different practices also develop. I've been talking about philosophical Taoism in terms of how can I get my thinking right to deal with the stresses of life. Well, over time, the Taoists took this to another level in which they developed practices to help them to increase the flow of the Tao through them. By the way, there's another key word called Qi, C-H-I, that's a very important concept in Taoism. Qi is not the same thing as the Tao. Qi is the expression of the Tao. It's the manifestation of the Tao. Qi is the bridge that connects human humans and the world with the source of it all, right? It's the life force. It's what we could just call it, the life force. Where every cell of your body, you see, is filled with life, the life force that keeps it going. You know, I don't keep these 100 trillion cells going. It's God's intelligence within me, the Tao's intelligence, life force within me that keeps me going. It's Qi. So that's Qi. So the Taoists said, what can we do to maximize Qi? And so over time, they developed a whole system of what today we call it Chinese medicine. All Chinese medicine evolved from the original teachings of Taoism. And the way they did is they would just test all these different. I think they ate. Houston Smith says they ate everything, trying to figure out what would give me strength, what would heal diseases. And over a period of time, this whole system of Chinese medicine developed, all of which was designed to increase to remove blocks of the flow of the qi through me. So we had Chinese medicine, Qigong, Tai Chi, bodily movement. Some of you know about these. Keto, and modern Asian martial arts, all developed from these basic teachings of Taoism. Acupuncture, in which we seek, the acupuncturist with needles will seek to open gates in which the flow of qi through us has been blocked, and they'll use these needles to open the gates, so to speak. And most importantly, the Taoists put great importance upon the practice of meditation, quieting the mind. In the Tao Te Ching it says, to the mind that is still, the whole world surrenders. Isn't that beautiful? It's just, and you see this, of course, in Judaism. 41st song, be still and know that I am God. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. When he talks about peacemakers, he's not talking about joining the State Department. He's talking about creating peace within our own minds. And so, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. They're the ones who will know who they truly are. Now, it's interesting, in Asia, Asia is different than the West in terms of the way it treats its religions. In Asia, the three primary religions that have been around the longest and have influenced the most people are Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. But this is the interesting thing. If you're an Asian, you may very well practice all three of these teachings, not just one over the other. It's not like here where I'm a Catholic or I'm a Baptist or I'm Episcopalian. There you practice all three. And so we're told that every Chinese is Confucian in ethics and public life, Taoist in private life and hygiene, Buddhist in matters relating to death. So another way of putting this is that an Asian will wear the hat of Confucius, the robe of a Taoist, and the sandals of the Buddhist. So all three of these interplay with one another. And now, interestingly, the way this can play out in the real world is if you look at the economic miracle that's happened in Asia over the past 25, 30 years. You take a look at and let's specifically look at car manufacturing. Look at Honda, Toyota, Nissan, and you compare them with the American manufacturers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Consumer Reports, decade after decade, I've been reading them going back to the 70s. Consumer Reports, of course, every issue, if you get it, talks about cars. And I keep wanting to see American cars do better, but decade after decade after decade, the Japanese cars are superior. They get superior ratings to the American cars. Okay, now why? We've got all this technology and all this great genius and hard work. We're not lazy. What's the problem? Well, one explanation is the way that these different religious teachings are practiced in the East compared to the way we are. Because they practice all three of these, they have a team spirit, you see, so that I read an article once about the president of Honda, and he talked about how, I'm just as concerned about the guy on the line as I am about my own family. We all work together. So everybody takes ownership, you see, for every car that's created, takes great pride in creating the best. And so a car which consists of thousands and thousands of parts, when you've got everybody working as one unit, you see, you come up with a car consistently, decade after decade, that outshines not just America, but everywhere else in the world. And I just think that's really, really cool. An example of Houston Smith gives us one statistic. He says there's one statistic that best teaches this. He says there's 1 year in Japan, the average worker would take 5.5 days vacation time. He was entitled to 12. He'd take 5.5 days of vacation time. And his explanation for this, when asked, why do you do this? He said, because I knew if I took the full 12 days, I'd be putting a burden upon my coworkers. You see? It's that mentality. It's all about us instead of all about me. This all goes back to Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. We're all working together. So I've just got one last thing I'm going to close on this, and that has to do with another great example of how all this plays out to the world about Taoism and Buddhism. Confucianism is, how many people in this room have heard of Phil Jackson? Anybody?
Basketball.
Yeah. Hey, we got one guy. Two. Now there's some others thinking. Now I didn't know who Phil Jackson was either. But apparently, if you're a basketball person, you're like me. You're not. I learned about Phil Jackson I was watching Oprah, Super Soul Sunday. Let me tell you, if you haven't watched Super Soul Sunday, you're cheating yourself. Oprah brings on these wonderful people. Like a couple of weeks ago, she brought on the guy who's the president of Whole Foods, and he talked about his spiritual philosophy and how it affects Whole Foods. And before that, she brought on the president of Starbucks, the CEO. But she brings on these wonderful people. So one day she had Phil Jackson. Well, I didn't know who Phil Jackson was, but it turns out Phil Jackson is a great basketball coach. He's won 11 national championships. He was a coach for the Chicago Bulls and for the Los Angeles Lakers. And he won 11 more than any coach in the NBA, in the history of the NBA. He's viewed as really being the greatest coach in the history of the NBA. He has the highest winning record of any coach. And Phil Jackson is an interesting guy. He was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian family. But when he got to college, he realized it wasn't his thing. But you know what he was interested in? He took a course in comparative religions, and he loved Buddhism. He loved these Asian religions. Then when he became a coach, and when he was actually a basketball player himself, he put into practice the basic principles of Buddhist meditation and so forth. And so he goes to the Chicago Bulls, and Michael Jordan was the star player, and they hired him as the coach. And he said, you've got a great team. Michael Jordan is probably the greatest player playing right now, but you never win the championships. And the reason is you're so concerned about the whole team is so concerned about helping Michael Jordan making these great plays. You're not working together as a team. I want you to work together as a team. Very Confucian idea, you see. I want you to work together. We're all doing this. And then guess what? They won 6 national championships. The other great thing he taught them was meditation. Now you can imagine you're a white guy, number one, and you go to all these basketball players. Most of those guys are African Americans from the inner city backgrounds. They know how to play basketball, and he's saying, I want to teach you about Buddhist meditation. This is how you can be a better basket. You can imagine how that went over. But darn it, they listened to him, and they started practicing follow your breath, follow, and just calming down. And Phil Jackson explained it like this. He says, when you're a basketball player and you're on the court and you've just fouled, or you've just been, told to sit in the bench, or you just missed an important point, you're kind of upset, It was really, really important you get that last basket, and everybody's upset, and not just people here, but thousands of people watching this on television. So all this is going on in the person's mind. Then the person goes back out on the court, and they're still kind of agitated, and obviously they can't play at full performance. So he taught them, he says, what I want you to do when you go to the bench, I want you to quieten your mind, put all your attention on your breathing. What happened 2 minutes ago on the court happened then. That was then. This is now. I want you to, now just doing this, following your breath, you see, starts slowing down the heart, slowing down the whole body. So they'd spend time on the bench just now meditating, right? Damn, when they went back out on the court, they were right on. You see? So this is how it plays out in the real world. These wonderful teachings of Confucius, the Buddha, and Lao Tzu, through the Asian economic miracle, through the basketball courts in America, and through our personal lives. So thank you very much for your patience. I hope you've enjoyed this talk.